Welcome to Not in a Huff with Jackson Huff, where we interview newsmakers, storytellers, and all-around interesting people. Sit back, relax, unless you're driving, and enjoy the show. Here's Jackson.
Hello. I am Jackson Huff. This is Not in a Huff. Thanks so much for joining me. As always, really appreciate it. This week, I'm interviewing Dennis Torres. Now, almost hard to kind of grasp exactly what this conversation is about because Dennis has just done so much. That's almost kind of why he was pitched to me. Somebody reached out and said, hey, you should interview this guy. He's a professor at Pepperdine, taught a lot of courses. He's had 64 different jobs, written 3 autobiographical novels, and just has a lot to teach us. You know, some of those jobs were running the merry-go-round on the Santa Monica Pier, being a post office, letter carrier, a dairy farmer, a bartender, a commercial pilot, a mediator. He was a soldier in Vietnam, and an author. And remember, that's just a few out of the 64 jobs that he's had. He crossed the country. He's done more than that. He actually, when he was young, took the highway all the way from the U.S. down to Colombia, and that was back when, you know, there wasn't a kind of a nice straight highway going through all these small towns. Just so much to learn. Outside of those autobiographical novels, recently he wrote a book called The Course, and The Course is a book all about a course that he taught at Pepperdine in the MBA program. And I've got to read you kind of the entire name of the class with the entire name of the book with the kind of the subtitle, because it's quite the name. The Course: Acquiring Wealth, Power, Success, Morally and Ethically, a Life Well Lived book. And that's kind of what he names his kind of his series, and he'll talk a little bit about that. So it's kind of the book 4 of his series. The first 3 are autobiographical. This one is a little bit different, but it's all about how to not be, I guess, unwealthy. I don't want to say poor, but easy ways to get ahead. And you know, he has some real thoughts on that. You know, kind of trimming the fat, if you will, on your daily spending. You know, I tried to talk a lot about Dennis, and we don't really go super deep into it because this is not a Dave Ramsey podcast. But I think the things that he had to say and the ethically and morally part is really, really impactful. I think you're really going to enjoy just hearing from Dennis. Honestly, he covers so many different things, but he's just a really cool guy. You know, I find, and I say that to him in the interview, but there's times that he kind of just throws in a quick thing about, you know, traveling with 3 strangers down to South America, that he kind of just throws into our conversation like a throwaway thing, where I've interviewed people that would be the entire podcast. So he's just a life well lived for sure. I think you're really, really going to enjoy this conversation with just an amazing guy and an author, a postal carrier, a merry-go-round operator, a commercial pilot, and I could spend the next 5 minutes just listing his jobs. So here is Dennis Torres. I'm here to do Dennis Torres. Mr. Torres, how are you?
Excellent. How are you doing?
I'm good. Hardest question of the whole evening. Just introduce yourself.
Okay. My name is Dennis Torres, as Jackson just said, and I hope you call me Dennis. I'm very informal when it comes to meeting people and talking with people.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I know we're going to talk about a lot of different things, but I think the best first thing to talk about is kind of just your backstory. I know you've written at least 3 autobiographical novels that are kind of, I guess, adventure based, and you've done a lot in your life. So let's kind of first talk about those novels. I think that'll get into some of this backstory and the interesting life that you've lived.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, I've had a lot of different jobs. Okay, and I counted up 64 jobs and careers and stopped after 64, even though I know there were a couple more that now and then come into mind. And the backstory on why that number came up and why I chronicled those jobs was I taught for many years in the full-time MBA program at Pepperdine University. And the students there often asked me, these were all MBA students, they often asked about careers, do you stay in one job or three jobs or whatever? And I said, well, you follow your instincts, you follow your passions. And I'm big on curiosity and passions. That way your life is more fulfilled than if you're just saying, I'm going to take a job for money. And over the course of our class room time, and they were 4-hour classes, I might say, so we spent a lot of time together in classrooms. They would ask me, they said, geez, professor, you've had so many jobs. So one of my trips back from Washington, D.C., I often went to Washington on business. You're sitting in an airplane. I said, I wonder how many I could remember. And I wrote up a list, and then I projected it in class for the students so that they could see having many jobs is not necessarily good or bad for your career. So that's how I came up with that number. And how I came to do that in my life is that I'm a very curious person. I was the type that would go into a library, a public library, and sort of never come out. And so I ended up doing things in life that I was curious about rather than do things and say, this is going to be my career and this is how I'm doing it for the money, whatever. And that sort of was the start and motivation for me doing a lot of diverse things in life.
Yeah, I think that's tough for a lot of people. I mean, even how long is the longest you've stayed with a job? I just wonder whether it's something like, you just do a lot of different things at once and you kind of have like a grounding of one solid job and some side things, or you really just moved around all these times. Just 64 jobs in a lifetime. I mean, I feel like that's less than a year at each job.
Well, you are correct. It's both long-term and having many side hustles. For example, when you ask what's the longest, well, I was 30 years at Pepperdine University, so that's long.
Yeah.
Okay, but while I was there at Pepperdine, I had three side hustles. Okay, so that was 4 jobs at one time. And that's how it ended up. Some of my jobs, just for your information, those of your listeners, I had a lot of minimum wage jobs. I worked in a bowling alley, and I ran the merry-go-round on the Santa Monica Pier. I was a dairy farmer. I was a bartender many times, a waiter in restaurants many times. And on the higher end of the pay jobs, I was a commercial plane pilot, an industrial engineer, a mediator and arbitrator of litigated cases. I've done hundreds and hundreds of settling litigated cases. Of course, a professor at the university. And as I said, just 64 and some of those. I was a process server. I don't have the list in front of me, but
Yeah.
it was pretty diverse.
Yeah, well, as somebody who's done so many things, I think it's only fitting to ask you, what are some of the most rewarding and least rewarding jobs that you've had?
Well, I liked a lot of them. Okay, I enjoyed running the merry-go-round at the Santa Monica Pier. Okay, there were certain skills involved in it that I took pride in, and I'll mention in a moment the best one. But I liked it because I met people, a lot of them tourists that came to Los Angeles, and the pier and the merry-go-round was iconic. It was built in Philadelphia in the 20s, each horse hand carved. And I met people that had great memories on it and became friends with some, dated some. I was single at the time that I did that. I enjoyed being a pilot because there was adventure flying and of course, challenging flying. By the way, the skill on the merry-go-round that I loved is you have to, when you're operating the merry-go-round, you have to get it on and off it while it's moving. And of course, at the outer perimeter, it's moving very fast. And so the idea is to do it gracefully too, so that it looks almost effortless, like a ballerina, having lean backwards and have the momentum carry it forward, and lean forward and have the momentum straighten you out, depending on whether you're getting on or off. So, doing that well was nice in practice. And dairy farming, I loved it. It was hard work, very hard work. Milked 42 cows twice a day. Um, had to, feed other farm animals that we had. We grew most of everything that we ate. And there was a lot to learn, because you're basically a vet as well when you're taking care of your cows or your partners. In fact, to this day, I'm a vegetarian, but I do drink dairy. I do eat the dairy because I was so attached to the dairy farming, and I always get a kick. I never buy low-fat anything because as a dairy farmer, we got paid the most for butter fat. So the higher the fat content, the more money we got. And so the idea of paying more for no fat or low fat doesn't make any sense to me. Okay. I don't know. I was just, I was an industrial engineer in a garment manufacturing factories in Northwest Pennsylvania. We made men's outerwear. And that was a whole new culture, not just the factory, but the people that lived in the town. It was a very different culture than where I grew up, and I enjoyed learning all about that. And I had an office on the 76th floor of the Empire State Building at one time. So
Yeah.
and I was in the military for 4 years. I did a tour of duty in Vietnam. So anyway, just following curiosity and learning things. When I got to Vietnam, I got somebody to tutor me right away on the Vietnamese language, and I picked up some proficiency in it.
You've just done so much, and I just wonder what advice do you have to people who are worried about, changing careers? Obviously, you've done it to a complete extreme, but you've got people that are stuck in, dead end jobs for 20 years and they're just complacent. They're worried about changing. I mean, I assume you have absolutely no fear into jumping into something new, or you wouldn't have been able to do it so many times. So what advice do you have to somebody on a much smaller scale that just needs to change from one job to another job because it's kind of it's not fulfilling them?
Well, first, I understand that people who have a spouse, and a lot of my jobs were before I was married. I've been married for over 50 years. And by the way, that was an adventure in itself too. My wife and I met at a restaurant, sort of a hangout for artistic people in Hollywood called Barney's Beanery. And we got into a conversation, went home together that night, never parted, and 6 weeks later we're married, and we're married 54 years now. Right, so
that's going to be a question, because I know that's another story. We'll get to that one.
Okay, so what advice? I realize people have families that they're committed to. You have children. It's not easy to just pick up and move away. So I still think that they could have follow their passions. There's an old saying that if you do something that you're passionate about, that you love, you'll never work a day in your life. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is what drove me to do, what I did. And even though many of these jobs and careers were prior to my marriage, many of them were after as well. Okay, and so I just made sure having several jobs at one time meant that I could change because I still had income coming in. So if I quit one or quit two, I still had income coming in that I can do it. So the important thing is life is pretty short, especially when you get older, like I am. I'm in the maybe the last semesters of my life. Even though I'm healthy and everything's great, the reality is nobody lives forever. and the time goes by very quickly. So if you don't like something, don't let it eat you up there. Take a chance. And in my book that we'll talk about a little bit, called The Course, subtitled Acquiring Wealth, Power, Success Morally and Ethically. In that book, I not only talk about how people even making minimum wage could end up becoming financially self-supporting, and that also that people who are, there's many examples in the book too of people who have only earned minimum wage, like I did many times, ended up having millions of dollars. It's not as difficult as you would think. And I would tell my students too, it's not what you earn, it's what you spend. Because if you earn $1 million a year and you're spending $1.5 million, okay, you're not getting anywhere. Okay. So I always was frugal in my life, even though, and frugal doesn't mean you have to live poor. When I made a lot of money, I had, other toys. And I got paid less than minimum wage on the merry-go-round, for example. But I was able to buy new cars at times, although I don't advise new because of the depreciation. But and I've had airplanes. I've had 7 airplanes in my lifetime. I drove a Rolls Royce for 6 years. Okay, and now, even though I can afford whatever I want, my principal car is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year, but it's in pristine condition. So the trick to being able to do things that you want is to always live below your means. And I find people who make minimum wage and less minimum wage spending money on things that they don't need and really don't want. Okay. It's, like Starbucks. I have nothing against Starbucks. Okay. But you can certainly have your own coffee at home for considerably less. In fact, my students, MBA students, had never failed. That they always said to me, "Oh, professor, it's easy for you to talk, but I have, 50,000 in student debt." And I said, "No, but you're buying a $7 Starbucks every day when we have free coffee in the student lounge, and you take that $7 and with compounded interest and investment potential, it could pay off your student loan by itself." Okay. All that to say is, well, one of the exercises that I always had each class do, each year that I had a new class, is not spend 1 cent for an entire day. Okay. And that, I said, you could fill your car with gas and plan for it. You can put food in your refrigerator, but on the day that you choose, don't spend 1 cent. And if you forget to put gas in the car, tough luck. Okay. And they loved doing that because it made them aware of where they're spending. And we also did one day where they wrote down every cent that they spent. Okay. And at first I thought the students wouldn't like that, but they actually loved it because they never realized what they were spending their money on. Okay. And the money adds up. Okay. In fact, I used to see students, we had a Starbucks on campus, and I used to see them buy a big one, drink a part of it, throw it away, then buy another one later after another class. Okay. And that's only a Starbucks. The same in the cafeteria. They could bring food from home. And one of our guest speakers, and interrupt me there. I don't want to take up all their time without questions, so interrupt me if you wish. But one of the guest speakers that I had come in each year for new classes, he immigrated from Iran after the Shah had fallen. And both he and his wife had master's degrees, and they had 2 children to support, 2 sons. And they came here not knowing the language. And the wife got a job working at KFC, the chicken franchise. And it helped because at the end of the day, she got to take the chicken home that didn't sell. And he got a job as an auto mechanic, which he knew nothing about, but he had to teach himself and learn on the job. And he said when the brake truck came around, everybody was over there at the brake truck, spend their money. He brought money from home and he worked. And then somebody told him, if you go to school, they have a trade school here, it's free, and you graduate in the mechanics, they'll pay you twice as much. And that's what he did. He went to the school at night, he got it, he got paid twice as much. And I won't go into all the frugal things that they did, but ultimately, within a few years, he was worth $20 million. He invested his money. The first thing he got into was a gas station. He heard that these people, it was Atlantic Richfield, I think, I'm trying to remember it, that they were going under. And he made a deal with them and said, if I can get your station in a profitable thing that will you sell it to me with nothing down, whatever. Long story short, he slept there and he did everything he could, and he ended up getting that station. Then he got another station. Then he got a house. Then he got another house. And when they had plenty of money, they were going to buy a bigger home. And he said, we deliberately bought it in a second-tier neighborhood because we did not want our children to grow up looking at the privileged people, their kids spending all kinds of money. And his kids became very successful in life too. All this to say is, I see people making minimum wage spending far too much money on things that they don't have to spend the money on. And if you can teach yourself frugality and simplify your life, you can take the money that you don't spend, and when it gets to be $1,000 or $2,000, you start investing it. You got compounded interest, and then you can make investments. And again, in my book there, I have plenty of those examples. So it's basically always live below your means and save some money.
Yeah, no, I think those are important. I think, and it sounds like, because you talk about, being fulfilled and things like that in life, it sounds like you're wanting to kind of trim off some of the fat, if you will, when it comes to spending money. But I think there's a point of going like too far too, and I don't think that's what you're saying. Because I mean, if you look at like Dave Ramsey type stuff, it's basically eat rice and beans and sit in a house without electricity until you've got money. I don't feel like that's what you're saying, right?
No, and you don't have to do that. Okay. I mean, uh, and being frugal is not being cheap. It's definitely something different. But if you spend everything you make, you're not going to really get ahead. And if you save something, and the way I worked it in my life and the way my students I had them do is I said, open up a linked account. So if you have $5, you send that $5 a week to the linked account, and whatever's in the linked account, you don't spend. That's your investment, and it doesn't take that much to invest, and even compounded interest, will return a lot, especially these days where you can get 4.5% in an interest-bearing account. So it's changing the way you think. And give an example when the students didn't want to spend anything for a day when that was assignment. They come back and they say, this was so much fun and so much pleasure. What happened? Because I'd always have them report back. What was your experience? And I remember some of them popping in my mind as I'm talking. They said, well, my boyfriend and I were going to go out to a movie. Then I remembered, we're not supposed to spend any money. And so we stayed home and watched television and made a food. And we actually talked and we had a great evening. It was a lot more fun than going out and grabbing a bite and going to a movie. And people just got to experience something out of the ordinary in their life that they liked.
Yeah, no, that makes sense for sure. And I want to now get to the part that we were tiptoeing with a minute ago, and that was you and your story with your wife, how you met, you kind of fell in love in 6 weeks, and then I believe you guys took a cross country trip or something right away. Talk a little
Yeah.
bit about that.
How did you know that? I don't think I mentioned it to you. Yes, what we
I'm
did is
I'm
it
psychic.
was sort of foolish because my wife was a assistant to a producer in television that they did three successful TV shows, Wild Wild West, To Rome with Love, and My Three Sons. And I had an opportunity. I was a writer at that time. I had an opportunity to write for them. I mean, where do you get that? You can't just walk off the street and get that. But because of her connection, but it was not the kind of writing that I wanted to do. It was almost like, to me, this is like commercial stuff. I wanted to do something creative and different. So foolishly, uh, we both quit our job. I had a Volkswagen, let's see, that was a 1967 Volkswagen convertible. And we bought a tent trailer from Montgomery Ward, which is long gone, but Montgomery Ward and Sears Roebucks were similar type stores. And I said, okay, I'm going to take my typewriter, I'm going to work on a book, and we're going to camp all around the United States and Canada, which is what we did. We took a year off and camped all over the place in national forests and whatever in the United States and Canada, saw some great things, and didn't spend a lot of money. And we had that camping experience. Then we ended up coming back to California, and of course, I had to get a job, and she also got a job, and went from there. So,
Yeah. And so I guess normally when in every relationship, there's a little bit of one person, I guess it's the grounding force. Are you both just very kind of free spirits, so to speak? Which one of you guys are like, you're going to change jobs again, or you want to do what? Which one's a little bit more of the one that's, I guess, more, I don't know, practical, so to speak?
well, we were both free spirits on that trip, but
Yeah.
getting back, I think we were both pretty practical.
Yeah.
Growing up, I never wanted to ask my parents, who were hardworking and they never made a lot of money. I never wanted to ask them for money. Okay, like my very first car, when I turned 17, which is the legal driving age in New Jersey, where I grew up. When I turned there, I bought my first car for all cash, $1,100, and that $1,100 was made at 50 cents an hour.
Hmm.
And I even walked to one of my jobs 3 miles each way to save a nickel on the bus. Okay. And I enjoyed walking, by the way, and still do. Okay. It was very relaxing. But I was able to pay for my first car cash, unlike my students who need a car, my parents get it. Okay. And I'm not putting them down. They just grew up in an entirely different society than the one I grew up in.
Yeah.
So,
I want to now kind of get to, and I think you've talked a little bit about it already, but I want to now give you the opportunity to talk about uh, the most recent book that you've written, The Course. Tell us a little bit about that book, how you decided to write it, what people are going to gain from it, all that kind of stuff.
okay. And then I'll flip to the first autobiographical novel I did because that was a great adventure if your audience likes adventures. But
Sure.
the course was this. I was teaching two courses in the full-time MBA program at the university. One was called Negotiation and Resolution of Business Disputes, and the other was Global Finance. Okay, and global finance, I took the students to Washington, first to New York. We went to Goldman Sachs and Deutsche Bank and Credit Suisse and Blackstone and all these investment banking companies. And then we would take the train to DC, and I would take them to the World Bank, the IMF, and the International Chamber, the National Chamber of Commerce, and um, and so one day the dean asked me to teach. He said, "We don't have a course in ethics." He said, "So I'd like you to teach ethics." So having not taught ethics before, I wrote to colleagues in different universities, asked them what syllabus they used, what books that they used, and their thoughts on teaching ethics. And then I also did some research. So in my research and and the feedback I got from my colleagues was by the time a person reaches grad school in their 20s, typically, they've already been told and exposed to what's right and what's wrong in their lives, and regurgitating back to them the same thing about this is right and this is wrong is a waste of time. And I didn't want to waste any time. I wanted to give them value, and I wanted to learn too. So I came up with the idea, instead of saying this is right and this is wrong, because sometimes right and wrong are different in different societies and cultures, I decided I would teach ethics in the much like physics, where each action you do has a corollary in a response. So if you choose to do this act, you're also choosing the consequence for that act. And so you can pick out life there. So if you cheat somebody, the consequence is your reputation may be bad, and you may enter a world of other cheats or whatever. Okay. But whatever you do, there's going to be a consequence for it. So it's not saying it's right or wrong. It's just the experience that you're going to have. And that was the basis for it. So I knew that if I just put out a course called ethics, students are not going to really want to sign up for it. So I had to come up with a good title that would entice students to sign for the course. Because the way it works in the universities is that if you have a new course, it's not put in the catalog, and it's not a official catalog course until you have developed enough student interest. And typically in a new course, you get the first year, you might get 3 students, and the next, if they like it, they'll tell other students, hey, take that course, it's good. Then you'll get 5, and then you get 8, and if it's popular, ultimately you'll get 30 students. So the title I came up with to entice students to come to it was Acquiring Wealth, Power, Success, Morally and Ethically. Okay, because I knew that they all want that, wealth, power, success. Okay. And the first semester I taught that, I was packed. And then the students told other students, and then I had waiting lists. So it was put in the catalog by the second year. It was the most popular course in the program. And I taught them how to acquire wealth, power, success, morally, and ethically. And I made different definitions for the words wealth. Wealth was, the baseline for wealth was, you're wealthy if your income stopped and you can continue your lifestyle for X number of years. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So wealth was related to your lifestyle. Okay. And self-sufficiency, because a lot of people make 10 million a year, but if their income stopped, they'd be finished in a few months. Okay. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean you have to live cheap. If you're making 10 million a year and you want a yacht or a Rolls Royce and it's still below your means, fine. And then power was not so much power over people as power over yourself to change your experience and to change your life. Okay. And success was, are you feeling fulfilled? Is what you're doing fulfilling you and giving your life great meaning? And then morally and ethically, again, people, we looked at the terms of what was moral and what was ethics in different cultures. Okay. And letting people experience it. And it was largely a critical thinking class too, because we took common myths that we are told in our lifetime and explored where they came from. Okay, that we believe things because that's the environment we grew up in, and we even did some silly things to make people aware of it. For example, I always ask the class, "Who was the first president of the United States?" And of course, they always say George Washington. So then I say, "Okay, Google who was the first president of the United States," and I find out that George Washington was actually the 7th president of the United States. That there were 6 others before him. But they were presidents under the Articles of Confederation rather than the U.S. Constitution. But they were still presidents of the United States. And the same thing with like Christopher Columbus. You know, we heard the story all our lives here that the Queen Isabella and Ferdinand the king financed this trip. It's all a myth. The whole story of Columbus never even got to the United States, never set foot in the United States. Okay. And he didn't discover anything. He landed in the Bahamas and Central America. And that myth is still taught in the class. The same with Paul Revere. Okay. Paul Revere never wrote and said the British are coming. Both the story of Christopher Columbus and the story of Paul Revere came from very popular fiction writers of the day. And they became truth because they became popular. There was a movie, you're probably too young to remember it, Who Shot Liberty Valance? It was a very popular Western film. And there was a line in that they say at the end, when the myth becomes truth, print the myth. And that's how a lot of our beliefs. And the point of it all was not to do anything but tell people we believe we have certain beliefs, and what are they based on? Okay. And you can believe what you want, but you should choose to believe rather than just believe. Think about things. If somebody says something, we accept it, especially these days with the internet. You see something on the internet and say, hey, that's the truth. Okay. Without doing any critical thinking. Oh, so all that to say, the course became very popular, and I love getting back. In the book, you'll see, even though I wrote it as fiction, so as not to get sued by anybody or offend anybody, the comments from the students in the book are all real. I don't use the students' names, but they're all real. And the comments are, this is the best course I've ever had in my entire educational career. And students write me all the time, hey, professor, you don't remember me. I took your class 10 years ago. And I want to let you know, when I left, I paid off my student loan in 2 years. And I now have $1 million in the bank, thanks to what I learned. Anyway, so that's how that book came about.
So with that book, is it you explaining how you developed this course, or is it you kind of teaching the course to others in book form?
And it's teaching the course to others. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have only a paragraph explaining how I developed it, but all of it is dialogue with a fictitious professor and the students. Okay, and the students' responses and the papers they wrote and their introspection. And we have guest speakers. Okay, all the guest speakers in there were real. I just changed their names. Okay. We had a panel of 3 real estate guest speakers in one of the class, and they told you how they started with nothing and ended up making millions of dollars. Okay, and it's explained step by step how they did it. Okay, and believe me, anybody could do it. Anybody, okay, can do what they did. And then I had one of our guest speakers who was Undersecretary of Labor, and he told the students that because of his relationship with his father, he only wanted to make money in life. That was the only thing that he cared about, was making money. And his uncle, who invented a household product, told him, well, Bill, if you only want to make money, then don't get married until you could afford to retire, because getting married will hamper your ability to take advantage of opportunities. For example, if your wife doesn't want to move to Tampa, Florida, or you have a child in school and she doesn't want to go, that may hamper you in opportunities. So Bill retired in his late 30s, a multi-millionaire, and then he went and got married and had children. Okay, but he explained to the students that was his focus, and he worked the plan, and he told them how he did it.
I gotcha. I want you now to tell us, you said there was another book that you wanted to highlight about your adventures. Do that if you would.
Okay, sure. That book is called The Amazon of Ray Goldberg Rivera. And that Ray is my alter ego, because these are autobiographical novels. And by the way, people who are not familiar with autobiographical novels, the Nobel Prize last year was given to a woman who only writes autobiographical novels, a French woman. So that adventure started when I came back from Vietnam, and I was only in Vietnam a year. We only had a 1 year tour of duty that was required. And when I got back to the States, it was like I was gone, I don't know, 20 years. It was just so different being in the jungles there and coming back to the States. And it was like sometimes I felt like I was on another planet. Okay. So I had to get a job, obviously. Came back, everybody, the family's happy to see you. That lasts a few days. I mean, not that they weren't happy to see me there, but I mean, you're not going to sit home and your mother's going to cook for you for the rest of your life, not in your 20s. So I looked in the newspapers at that time. In the newspaper, want ads is where you found jobs. And the only jobs I saw on there were commission jobs, most of them for selling insurance. Well, I wasn't going to put on a suit and tie and sell insurance, not after Vietnam. It just wasn't going to work for me. And day after day, I looked there, and then I don't know, my eyes dropped down to something that said, "Want to explore the Amazon," and that piqued my interest. Long story short, it was put in there by a woman who was a member of the International Explorers Club, and she, for a fee, she told you how you can go to the Amazon and make money either along the way or in the Amazon and have a great adventure. And she also put you together with people who will share the expenses with you. And so we made a plan. I was going to drive in that time I had a 1962 Volkswagen Beetle. I was going to drive that down to the country of Panama from the Los Angeles area and sell the car in Panama, where she told me I could get twice the amount of money for it in Panama as I could selling it in Los Angeles. Then I would use that money to finance the rest of my adventures through South America and living in the Amazon. And then on the way back, I would dig up pre-Columbian artifacts, bring them back, and sell it to collectors here in the United States. And she told me where I could find these pre-Columbian artifacts, etc. Well, frankly, I didn't care about that. I did care about the adventure. So she fixed me up with a gal who was a super religious missionary type gal who told me she had backpacked through Africa and wanted to go down to the Amazon and preach to the Indians. And then also the last minute, there was a California surfer who had never been out of California in his life, but he had a compelling reason he wanted to go. So the three of us headed off on the adventure, and we drove through obviously Mexico and almost every Central American country, and had great adventures. Got to Panama, sold the car in Panama. We had great adventures during the trip down, of course. And I might say this too. The Pan American Highway was not completed the year I did this. So much of the Pan American Highway was a dirt trail, like you would hike in the mountains. Okay. And I had no idea where gas stations were, if they were there. And we had lots of adventures. And then I sold the car in Panama, and then the girl stayed in Panama. She found another missionary group that was preaching to the Indians. And then the guy and I, we went to the San Blas Islands off the coast of Panama and Colombia, lived with the Kuna Indians there for some time, and then got into Colombia and Ecuador. And he had to leave in Ecuador. He had to go back to the States. And I went on and lived in the Amazon for several months, living off the land, and then got back into Iquitos in the Peruvian Amazon and went around South America having other adventures. Ended up coming back on a banana boat out of Esmeraldas, Ecuador, to the city of Panama, because they were shipping bananas from Ecuador to Tampa, Florida, and then hitchhiked back to California. And there's tons of people I met and adventures I have. You get to learn these countries and the customs and the people and just all wild time. So that was covered in that book, the Amazon of Ray Goldberg Rivera.
Well, I'm kind of shocked, Dennis, because I think I think just that little throw in that you just did for that book, that would be something that I think that most people we would just be talking about the entire time. So it just shows how much you've done. I think that's amazing. So you've got three books. What are the other books?
Well, the second book I wrote, the Amazon one was the first one. I wrote these after I retired from Pepperdine. So the Amazon book was the first one. Then I wrote a book about my experiences in Vietnam because I had some very unique experiences, and of course the war. I did not want to do war stories where you're shooting here and shooting there, although some of that's in there, you can't help it. Okay, I wanted to cover how the people in Vietnam and the GIs too, how they managed to find normalcy, in quotes, day-to-day living when bombs and gunfire are an everyday occurrence. Okay, and the people in the cities and villages had to go about their life as if there was no war. They had to. So people end up getting married, having children, getting the children in school, going to jobs, all while getting bombs bursting around you and getting shot at, and the black market, the inflation of currency, and I got involved in some money making deals. I also was able to teach English at the Hoi Viet Mi, which is the Vietnamese American Association. So I got a teaching job there, along with a colonel that was in my outfit, and I got involved in black money currency exchange. I actually signed for the last pallets of cash that were shipped to the country to pay the GIs their income. So what happened is when I got there, we were all paid in cash. Well, I can't remember if it was weekly or biweekly or whatever, but we were paid in cash. And then we could exchange some of that cash for Vietnamese currency that we could spend in the towns and villages. But because the exchange rate that we could get on the black market was double what was the official exchange rate, everybody was doing it. I don't care if they were a colonel or a private. They're doing, who's going to pass up double the money? And so we realized, of course, that when the people on the black market were giving you double, the reason was because that U.S. dollars were going to the communists that we were fighting to buy weapons from the Chinese principally and Russia, because nobody's going to take Vietnamese currency for anything. They wanted greenbacks. So in a sense, we were financing the war against us by doing it. But I don't care. Generals did it. I don't care. Congressmen did it. Again, the temptation of getting double your money was there. So I ended up making a lot of money on a currency exchange operation that I had going there too. But more importantly, the book is about, the name of that book is called There Are No Good Giants. And I took that title from a poem written by a captain in the U.S. Army who was stationed in Europe during World War II and wrote a poem from his experiences that basically said that there are no good giants, meaning that big governments and big interests is not good. They were bad actors in war, just like in Vietnam. I witnessed tons of stuff being sold to the U.S. government that was worthless. Ship after ship coming in with stuff that nobody needed. I said somebody was cleaning out a warehouse and selling it to the government. Okay, there was corruption, I think is what I'm really speaking here. There was a lot of corruption in the South Vietnamese government, in the U.S. government, a lot of horrible war criminal type activities, nice people who did things that they would never do if not for the circumstance. And so I wanted people to know not just about shooting, but about how lives are affected in a combat zone. So that was the second book. There Are No Good Giants. Then, and that one is nominated for an Eric Hoffa Award now. Then the third book was the one I told you about, Not Far from the Ocean. I think I told you about that. That covers, well, maybe I didn't tell you, but it covers 4 different jobs that I had when I came back from the Amazon. Okay. Because again, I had to work. So the first job I had was as a representative for the telephone company in the ghetto in Los Angeles. I was, and then I was a veteran of Vietnam, so he figured I could handle it. And my job was to tell people that if they didn't pay their bills, their telephone bill, we were going to cut off the service. And at that time, the Public Utilities Commission required that we do so in person. I didn't have to collect the money, but if they offered it to me, I, of course, would take it. But my training for the job, they told me, for example, when you'll be driving a company car, and when they see that company car, they know that you're not there for something they're going to be happy about. So people may jump in behind the car when you're parallel parking just so you hit them so they could sue the company. And they would tell me if you were offered a drink, take it, because it might not work well for you if you refuse, and just call us and we'll pick you up. But I don't want to paint the community as bad, because I had wonderful, wonderful friendships and experiences in there, and I got to understand their perspective of life. I even dated somebody from the community while I was doing this. And there's a lot of good insights and good folks that I met. And so then I quit that job, and I became a mailman in the beach town of Santa Monica. And I loved it because I walked in the tree-lined streets. I had wonderful patrons, is what we call people who get mail. Some of them movie stars that I got to know, like Grandma from the Beverly Hillbillies. Remember that show? Mm-hmm. Irene Ryan, she would always invite me into the kitchen and make me lunch. Okay, and other actors and just fine, wonderful people. And then when I quit the post office, and a lot of it is the interaction between the old guard, the people who are career mailmans, and the hippies who were in there on temporary jobs, and the culture clash between the old guard and the new people. For example, mail was sacrosanct. Nobody messes with the mail. We had an obligation, but even that, the old guard, when Playboy magazine came out for their, instead of delivering it that day, they take it home and read it that night and deliver it the next day. And then there was a publication, Chairman Mao's Little Red Book, that was given out free and through the mail. And the old guard hated communism. Okay, they had a lot of prejudice. And so they would throw those books in the trash. And the hippies, of course, loved it. And there was all kinds of fights back and forth, not physical fights, but verbal fights in the annex where we did the mail. So that's covered in that part. And then the next job I took was running the merry-go-round on Santa Monica Pier, which I already mentioned, which is a great experience. And then when I quit that, I took a job writing for the LA Free Press, which was the most notorious, popular underground newspaper probably ever. And also Teen Set magazine, where I covered the top rock and roll bands of the era. So I got to meet a lot of the rock and roll people that I wrote about, and had some great adventures. I lived on the Sunset Strip during the hippie era, which was a good adventure. So anyway, that's the book. And I called it Not Far from the Ocean because one of the things I learned when I was working in the ghetto, and it was a ghetto, and this little story will even exemplify that for you. I met two guys that were my age group in their 20s there. And in the course of, they were athletic, good-looking guys. And in the course of a conversation, I asked them, "What are you guys going to do with your lives? You know, what career? What are you going to do?" And they told me they both said they wanted to be shoe shine guys. Well, that shocked me because why would they shoot so low? There's nothing wrong with being a shoe shine person, but why would they look at that as a top of the of what they could achieve? And then of course I understand why, because nobody they had ever known had done more than that. So they were sort of locked in the prism uh, of what their experience was in life. And in the course of the conversation, they and other people I met had told me they had never seen the ocean. Now, if you can imagine living in Los Angeles, which is a seaside city, and never seeing the ocean, was like, are you kidding me? It's a 25-cent bus ride. And they're adults, young adults, and they had never seen the beach or the ocean because they lived their entire life within the ghetto, within blocks of where they grew up. And so I learned a lot about the people, during that period of time. It was a great experience for me. So I call that not far from the ocean because because even we who grew up with more expanded horizons and expanding experiences also have to look beyond our experiences. The ocean isn't far off. Anyway, sorry for going on, but
No, I love it. I think all of those books sound extremely, extremely interesting. I'm glad that we kind of covered them all enough to pique people's interest, but not enough that they don't need to still pick up the books. So we've talked about 4 books. I think they all people can gain a lot from. How can people find all 4 of these books?
well, Amazon, of course. Okay, and so that they all are in one area in Amazon, I call if you call your books a series, then Amazon puts them all on like one page. When somebody looks at one, they'll see the others. And so my publicist said to me, "What do you want to call the series?" And just off the top of it, I was trying to think. I said, "A Life Well Lived." And so if they put in Not Far from the Ocean, that's a short title, or any of the other titles I mentioned, by Dennis Torres, they'll see all 4 books. And they're also available, believe it or not, online. They're Barnes and Noble, Walmart, Ingram Spark. So if they just Google it, they'll find, I saw it even eBay. I never bought anything from eBay. I don't know how it works, but I saw it listed in eBay too. But Amazon, of course, is the easy one.
Yeah. Well, we've covered so much. I think we could keep on going and cover a lot more. You just keep throwing in little side notes that I think could be a whole podcast. But I really, really have appreciated your time. I think that we have a lot to learn from a lot of your experiences, and I'm glad that you've written them down so we can, I guess, share a little bit of everything you've done.
All right, well, Jackson, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. I appreciate getting to meet you.
So that was Dennis Torres, amazing guy. I will put a link in the show notes to his Amazon page so you can check out all 4 of his books. I am especially interested in those autobiographical ones. I think that I would just learn a lot from that. I learned so much just talking to him today. So I really want to read those. I would be really interested in the course as well, just to kind of hear how that class went, how everything kind of went down. I know that it's kind of written as you're a student in the course, kind of. So urge you to check out all 4 of his books. Again, those links will be in the show notes. If this is your first time listening to this podcast, appreciate you being here. If you don't mind, subscribe, follow, depending on if you listen on Apple, Spotify, or somewhere else. It's different names, but follow along so you know when new episodes are coming out. They come out every Wednesday, but it'll remind you of those those releases. Over 170 guests in the past, so really, really appreciate those who go back and listen to some other episodes. I've interviewed so many amazing people. If you listen, you like it, give a 5-star rating on Apple and on Spotify. Leave a written review on Apple, even more amazing. Go follow on Instagram, Not Enough Podcasts, Not Enough with Jackson F on Facebook, jacksonf.com. Lots of places to follow along. Really appreciate you being here. Appreciate Dennis for being here. We'll see you next week. Take it away, Chris.
This has been Not in a Huff with Jackson Huff. Thank you for listening. Be sure to join us next time, where we will interview another amazing guest who is sure to make you laugh or make you think. Or, hey, maybe even both. But until then, keep being awesome.